What do you think, what do you think makes a good teacher out on the basketball court? What are the things that you have to do to connect with players to be able to teach them the skill or the concept or the play or whatever it is, depending on what level and how, what it is exactly that you're doing? What do you think are the keys to being a good teacher of the game of basketball?
To be a good teacher, number one, I think and this is just based on my experience and my opinions. Number one is just really, really knowing your content, really, really knowing your subject, whatever that may be. If you're out there and you're having to constantly look at your notes or go back to stuff, and you're thinking and you're thinking about what you're thinking, you're probably not going to be, a very good teacher that way. And then, the second thing, just being a communicator and to be a great communicator, I think you gotta have great confidence. And, one lesson I learned from my mom growing up, she would always tell me, and, I admire the heck out of her. She single mom for a long time, had to work 3 different jobs, and she didn't know anything about sports. She still doesn't know anything to this day. She doesn't quite get what I do, sometimes with some of the players, she doesn't get that, some of these guys are a really, really big deal. But, she would just always tell me hey, sometimes you gotta fake it till you make it. Or she's like, just walk in there and act like you own it. She would just always tell me, own the place. And so to be a good teacher, whatever environment I walk in now, or even back then, I'm like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to at least act like I own the place and act like I know what I'm doing, know my content. And I think because of that, you could really get others to believe, get others to buy in, get others to listen to you, kind of command a room, command a presence and things like that. It's simple to do, but sometimes it's complex in nature. Or, like I said, going back to that word, that confidence word, it's hard to do for some people.
It absolutely is. I think that there's a lot to be said for those two things that you just mentioned. One being preparation. So making sure that you understand what you're trying to teach and how you're going to teach it. I think that's key. And then being able to communicate what it is that you know. And a lot of times you'll see someone, and I think you can speak to this as, maybe in your short time in education. I've certainly seen it in the education field, and we've all, I'm sure, seen it on the basketball court. If you've been in a AAU tournament, you've seen all different kinds of coaches, some of whom can teach the game and others who you might not want near any of your players or your own children. And I think it comes down to that you sometimes will see people who maybe have a tremendous knowledge of the game of basketball. Maybe they were really good players. Maybe they're somebody who studies a lot of film, or maybe somebody who really does know a lot. But then when they try to communicate that to a kid, maybe they're teaching a 6th grader something that is a concept that should be taught to a high school varsity player, or vice versa. And I think you have to, when you see someone who's a talented, and I'm going to use the word teacher instead of coach. When you see someone who's a talented teacher, you see someone who is able to connect with the people that they're teaching in such a way that they communicate it. And you mentioned a different learning style. Everybody has a different way of learning. And I think as a good teacher, you recognize that, and you're able to say, okay, I know as I get to know this player, now I know that I have to attack this in this particular way. And maybe with another player, it's completely different. And I think that there are some people who, I don't want to say it's a talent, because I do think it can be developed, but I think there are some people who are natural teachers, and they just can walk out onto a court or into a classroom. And if they have a general rudimentary knowledge of what they're trying to teach, to your point, they can sell themselves and they can sell what they're communicating. And there are other people who might have way more knowledge, but just don't have any idea of how to impart that to the players that they're working with. And I think that's something that, it sounds like you've been able to do very, very well in your career, is be prepared and then also be able to communicate it to your players.
Yeah. Mike, one question I get a lot now, especially having coached the Division I level, leaving there to